Hey everyone, I'm Jordan Whitaker and I'm 21 years old. I own a small auto repair shop here in Tennessee, right on the edge of South Memphis. The streets are full of potholes, and the houses look like they're telling stories of past recessions. Around here, the air always smells of motor oil, dust, the faint sound of arguments drifting from somewhere in the neighborhood. South Memphis isn't a place you'd want to be lost in at night, but for me, it's home more at least. It used to be. I'm sitting here now in a corner of my garage at an old wooden desk, writing these words to confront my past. My story isn't one of bright sunshine or carefree days. It starts with scars, screams, and moments I truly thought I wouldn't survive. But somehow I did, and I'm still standing. Let me tell you about it, from the earliest days I can recall. I don't know where I was born or who my biological parents were. My first memory is of Eugene Turner's large hands, the man. I called my foster father pulling me out of a social worker's car when I was just 4 years old. My foster father had a sharp, angular face and eyes that always held an unreadable expression, as if he was constantly calculating my worth. Brenda Turner, my foster mother, stood nearby, her lips tightly pursed, her gaze sweeping over me like I was just another piece of merchandise. They adopted me, a white kid, while they were both black. In a neighborhood where racial differences often made you the target of curious or contemptuous stares, South Memphis back then was a bleak scene. Run-down houses with peeling paint, broken windows patched with duct tape. The wail of police sirens was a familiar soundtrack. The streets were filled with young men loitering on corners, exchanging suspicious little packages, while kids ran around, teetering between innocence and danger. The economy was in a slump, and unemployment was rampant. Families like the Turners survived on welfare, or rather, exploited it. They took me in, and later, Eli, a scrawny boy, and Naomi, a girl whose eyes always seemed on the verge of tears. The three of us, not connected by blood, but by a shared roof and shared pain. On the surface, the Turner household looked like a model family. Brenda always knew how to flash a fake smile when the social workers came by. She'd put her arm around me, calling me her dear son, while Eugene sat there, nodding with a stern expression. They were talented actors, I'll give them that. Child welfare agency inspections always ended with satisfied nods from the workers. Never stayed long enough to see the truth, but once the door closed, their masks came off. Eugene didn't hesitate to raise his hand. He'd hit me for the smallest reasons. A stain on the floor. It's an answer he didn't like, or simply because he was drunk and needed to vent his anger. Brenda was different. She didn't hit, but her words cut like knives. You're worthless, she'd say coldly. If it weren't for me and your father, you'd be dead on the streets. I don't know what hurt more, Eugene's punches or Brenda's insults. Probably both, because they piled up day after day. I started working odd jobs at 14. During the day, I went to school, fighting off sleep because I'd spent the previous night washing dishes in a dingy diner a few blocks from home. Just a year later, at 15, I dropped out of school for good. I got a job at an auto repair garage. By day, I was at the garage from early morning, doing all sorts of grunt work cleaning tools, sweeping floors, carrying heavy parts, whatever I was told to do. At night, I'd return to the old diner, washing dishes until late. My life back then revolved around motor oil, dish soap, and fitful sleep. Every penny I earned, no matter how little, had to be handed over to Eugene and Brenda. Live under this roof? You contribute, Eugene would say. Beer in hand, eyes glued to the TV. I didn't dare argue. Not because I was afraid of being hit, but because I knew if I resisted, I'd pay a price. And not just me, Eli and Naomi would suffer too. That was what I feared most. Eli was a shy boy, always shrinking as if he wanted to disappear from the world. He had big, bright eyes, but always looked down, as if afraid someone might read his thoughts. Naomi was different. She had a quiet strength despite her fragile appearance, like a brittle twig. She'd hold my hand when Eugene went on a rampage, whispering, "Don't fight back, Jordan. It'll be okay." But I knew she didn't believe her own words. It was just her way of comforting herself and me. We lived in a cramped house where everything was worn out, from the tattered sofa to the wobbly dining table. The smell of cigarettes and cheap liquor clung to every corner. I slept on an old mattress in the corner of the living room, while Eli and Naomi shared a tiny room with a single double bed. Every night I'd hear Eli's muffled sobs, trying to keep quiet so no one would hear. I wanted to run to him, hug him, and tell him everything would be all right, but I couldn't. How could I promise anything when I didn't even believe it myself? Some days I thought about running away. I imagined escaping far, far away to a place where no one knew who I was. Where? No one could hurt me anymore, but every time I looked into Eli's and Naomi's eyes, I knew I couldn't leave. They were the reason I stayed, the reason I gritted my teeth and endured. I didn't want them to think I'd abandoned them the way the world had abandoned us. In those years, I learned how to survive. I learned to bow my head, to stay silent, to hide my tears. But deep inside, there was a smoldering fire that never went out, and I swore I wouldn't let it die. Every morning I got up, threw myself into work, and held on to the hope that one day I'd get Eli and Naomi out of this hell. Out at 16, an age when I should have been worrying about homework or shooting hoops with friends. I was instead preoccupied with making sure Eli and Naomi had enough to eat, figuring out how to get them decent clothes for school so they wouldn't be mocked by their peers. South Memphis wasn't a place for childish dreams. Here you grew up faster than you wanted to, and I was forced to become an adult far too young. Every day I left the house before sunrise, pedaling a rickety bike to the auto repair garage a few blocks away. I worked until my arms and legs ached, the smell of motor oil clinging to my skin. Then I'd head straight to the diner, where towering stacks of dirty dishes awaited me in a sink full of cold, soapy water. Every dollar I earned, no matter how small, went to Eugene and Brenda. But I always tried to hide a few bucks here and there, tucked into an old sock under my mattress. Not for me, but for Eli and Naomi. Eli, the boy with big eyes who always seemed to be apologizing to the world, needed new shoes. His old ones were torn, exposing his toes, and I saw how he tried to step lightly so no one would notice. Naomi needed a new backpack. Her old canvas one was frayed, the zipper broken, causing her books to spill out whenever she ran from the bullies at school. I couldn't let my siblings endure more humiliation. I'd already taken enough for all three of us. I remember the day I secretly bought shoes for Eli. I'd saved for 3 months, skipping lunches, drinking tap water instead of buying soda like the others at the garage. When I handed Eli the pristine white sneakers, his eyes lit up, but only for a moment. "Jordan, Mom and Dad will be mad," he whispered, his voice trembling. I grabbed his shoulders and said firmly, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." But I hadn't anticipated the fury of Eugene's wrath. That night when I walked into the house, the shoes were ripped from Eli's hands. Eugene stood there, a beer bottle in hand, his eyes bloodshot. "Where'd you get the money for these, huh?" he roared, his voice echoing through the small house. I tried to explain, saying I'd bought them with my extra work money, that they were for Eli, but he wouldn't listen. The first punch hit my stomach, making me stagger. Naomi screamed, trying to run to me, but Brenda yanked her back, snapping, "Shut up, you idiot!" Eli stood there crying, the shoes lying on the floor, smudged with dirt. I just stood there, silent, taking it. I'd learned long ago that fighting back only made things worse. After that day, I vowed to be more careful. I didn't buy anything else, didn't dare do anything to provoke Eugene or Brenda. But my compliance only seemed to make them crueler. They demanded I work more, give more. Brenda started checking my pockets every night, pulling every cent from my jacket. "You think you're smarter than me?" she'd sneer, her voice sharp as a blade. I'd just bow my head, clenching my teeth to hold back the words I wanted to say. I didn't want my siblings to see me break, but the deepest pain wasn't the beatings or the insults. The worst was watching Eli and Naomi grow up in fear. Eli started to stutter. Every time Eugene yelled, he'd tremble, unable to form a complete sentence. Naomi grew quieter, the sparkle in her eyes fading. She'd sit alone in a corner, drawing crude sketches of houses with bright suns, things we never had. I wanted to hug them, to tell them I'd protect them, but I knew my promises held no weight. All I could do was try silently, like a mute older brother doing everything for the siblings I loved. Once, child welfare services came to check on us after a teacher reported bruises on Naomi's arms. I remember Brenda cleaning the house spotless. That day, dressing us in the best clothes she could find, Eugene sat at the dining table, pretending to read a newspaper, while Brenda flashed her sweet smile, gushing about how much she loved us. I wanted to scream, to tell the worker it was all a lie, that they were beating us, that they used welfare money for booze and cigarettes instead of food for us. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. If I spoke up and they didn't believe me, things would only get worse. The worker left with a smile, saying our family was stable.
Stable.
The word felt like a bitter joke. I started to feel like I was dying inside. Not from the beatings, but because I couldn't protect my siblings. I felt useless, like a silent shadow in my own life.
Every night.
Lying on my old mattress, I'd hear Eli's muffled sobs from the next room. I'd wonder if I was really the brother they needed. I wanted to do more, to give them a better life, but I was trapped in fear and helplessness in that very house. But then one night, Naomi snuck out of her room and sat beside me on the cold floor. She took my hand and whispered, "Jordan, I know you're trying. I don't blame you." Those words, small but sincere, were like a breeze fanning the dying embers inside me. I hugged her, fighting back tears. "I'll find a way, Naomi," I said, my voice trembling. "I promise." I didn't know how to keep that promise, but I knew I had to try. For Eli, for Naomi, and for myself. In the days that followed, I worked harder, hid money more carefully, and started quietly searching for opportunities. I didn't know that opportunity would come in a way no one could have expected. I was 18, still working at the auto repair garage. The boss, Hank, was a gruff, short-tempered old man who'd fire anyone who dared defy him. The garage itself was nothing special. A few tool racks, a corner piled with old tires, and a creaky ceiling fan that sounded like it might fall any moment. But for me, it was a place where I could breathe, if only a little, away from the stifling atmosphere of Eugene and Brenda's house. I did everything there, cleaning, changing tires, fixing brakes, whatever Hank threw my way. I didn't complain. Every paycheck was a small step toward freedom for me and my siblings. Then came the fateful day that changed my life. It was a sweltering summer day, the Tennessee heat scorching my skin. I was hunched under the hood of an old Ford, sweat dripping down my forehead when I heard the roar of an engine in the distance. It wasn't the usual sound of a car. This was powerful, fierce, like the growl of a beast. I looked up, wiping my hands on my oil-stained shirt, and saw a sleek black van, old but meticulously maintained, pull up to the garage. A man stepped out. Tall, bald, wearing a black leather jacket with a coiling snake tattoo peeking out from his arm. The emblem on his chest, a pair of red wings with the words "Hell's Angels," made me freeze. In South Memphis, you didn't mess with guys like him. They weren't just bikers. They were often outlaws. The kind of people where a wrong look could land you in a hospital. "Van broke down on the road," he said, his voice low and raspy, like he'd smoked his whole life. "Need it fixed fast? My little girl's sick. Gotta get her to a doctor." I glanced at the back seat and saw a tiny girl, maybe 9 years old, curled up, her face flushed, eyes shut tight. My heart clenched. I knew the helplessness of watching someone you love suffer. I turned to Hank, who was standing in the corner of the garage, coffee cup in hand, eyeing the man wearily. "Jordan, leave it," he said, his voice low but firm. "Don't get involved. This guy's bad news." The other mechanics, Jimmy and Luis, shook their heads, backing away as if the man carried a plague. I understood. Your nobody wanted trouble, especially with a biker who could bring a whole gang down on us if something went wrong. But then I looked back at the girl in the van. She let out a faint whimper, her small hand clutching a thin blanket. I thought of Eli, of Naomi, of the times I wished someone had stepped up for us when no one dared. "I'll fix it," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Hank glared at me. "You crazy, Jordan?" I said, "Leave it." But I didn't listen. I couldn't. I walked to the van, popped the hood, and started checking. The biker stood watching me, arms crossed, his sharp eyes tracking my every move, like a wolf sizing up prey. I felt his gaze, heavy and unnerving, but I didn't let it distract me. I focused on the engine, finding the issue, a loose fan belt and a nearly dead battery. I worked fast, hands moving deftly, sweat streaming down my face. In my mind, all I could think about was that the girl needed to get to a hospital, and I, just a lowly worker, could do something right. Less than an hour later, I started the van. The engine purred smoothly. I closed the hood, wiped my hands on my shirt, and turned to the biker. "Done, sir. You can take her now." He looked at me, his gaze softening slightly, as if he hadn't expected me to pull it off. He nodded, walked to the van, but before getting in, he turned back and extended his hand. "Ray," he said, introducing himself. "Thanks, kid. I won't forget this." I shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, and nodded. "Just doing my job." Ray drove off, the girl still lying in the back, and I stood there watching until the van disappeared. I felt a flicker of pride, a bit of relief, like I'd done something big. But that feeling didn't last long. Jordan Whitaker. Hank's voice snapped me back. He stormed over, face red, eyes blazing. "Who do you think you are? I told you to leave it, and you disobeyed me. Do you know who that guy was? If anything went wrong, this whole garage would be done." I tried to explain, saying I just wanted to help, that the girl needed to get to a hospital, but Hank wouldn't hear it. "You're done," he roared. "Grab your stuff and get out. You're fired." I stood there stunned, as if the ground had collapsed beneath me. Fired. The word echoed in my head. I'd worked at this garage for nearly 3 years, pouring sweat and even blood once when my hand got caught in an engine. This was where I earned money to feed Eli and Naomi, to shield them from Eugene's fists. And now, because I did the right thing, I'd lost it all. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I quietly gathered my things, an old jacket, an empty lunchbox, and a few coins in my pocket. Jimmy and Luis looked at me, their eyes full of pity, but they said nothing. I walked out of the garage, the harsh sunlight hitting my face, but I felt cold, bone-chilling, cold. I didn't know what to tell Eli and Naomi. I didn't know how to face Eugene and Brenda when I got home, jobless, penniless, with nothing but empty hands. I walked down the pothole-ridden road, my mind blank. The distant sound of a car horn reminded me of Ray and the girl. I didn't regret helping them, but I couldn't help wondering, was my kindness worth this price? I'd promised Naomi, promised Eli, that I'd find a way to get them out of hell. But now, I didn't even know where I was going or how I'd survive. I stopped by the roadside, sitting under a tree, and looked out. The sun was setting, painting the South Memphis sky red. I thought of my siblings, of Naomi's eyes when she said she believed. In me, I clenched my fists, feeling the small flame in my chest flicker back to life, however faintly. I couldn't give up. Not now. As I walked home, that flickering flame inside me wavered like a candle in the wind. I knew what awaited me. Eugene and Brenda wouldn't forgive me for losing my job. They didn't care about the reason. To them, I was just a money-making machine, and if that machine broke, they wouldn't hesitate to discard it. I walked slowly, trying to delay the inevitable confrontation. The streets of South Memphis sank into darkness, streetlights flickering weakly, and the distant wail of police sirens echoed. I felt like I was walking into a trap, but I had no other choice. When I pushed open the door, the smell of liquor and cigarettes hit me so familiar it made me shudder. Eugene was sprawled on the sofa, a beer bottle in hand, eyes glued to the TV. Brenda was in the kitchen, chopping something, the knife clacking against the cutting board. Eli and Naomi sat in the corner, heads bowed like two small shadows. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I got fired from the garage today," I said. The room froze. Eugene turned slowly, his eyes blazing with anger. Brenda stopped, the knife hovering over the cutting board. "What did you say?" Eugene growled, his voice like thunder. I tried to explain, talking about the biker, the sick girl, how I just wanted to do the right thing. But before I could finish, the beer bottle in Eugene's hand flew at me, smashing into the wall near my head, glass shards scattering everywhere. "You think you're a hero, you idiot?" he roared, jumping to his feet. "Do you know what I needed that money for? You want this whole house to starve? Naomi screamed, running to stand in front of me, her small arms spread as if to shield me. Eli inched closer, eyes brimming with tears, but he didn't dare speak. Brenda stormed over, yanking Naomi away and slapping her hard across the cheek. "Shut up, you little brat," she hissed. I lunged forward, pushing Brenda back, but Eugene was already there. He grabbed my collar and punched me in the stomach. I crumpled, the pain so intense I couldn't breathe, but I still tried to stand, shouting, "Don't touch them." What followed was a whirlwind. Eugene shoved me to the floor, kicking my back, each blow feeling like it could snap my bones. Brenda stood there smirking as if watching a play. "Who do you think you are, Jordan?" she said coldly. "You're just trash we picked up. Now you're useless. So get out of my house," Naomi sobbed, clinging to Eli. But they could do nothing. Neither could I. I crawled to my feet, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth, and looked into my siblings' eyes. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I knew they couldn't hear me over Eugene's shouting. "Get out!" Eugene bellowed, shoving me toward the door. I grabbed nothing but my tattered jacket and a few coins in my pocket. The door slammed behind me, the lock clicking like it was sealing off my entire world. Stood on the porch, the night fully dark, the early winter chill cutting through my thin jacket and into my skin. I heard Naomi crying inside, Eli calling my name, but I couldn't go back. If I did, I knew Eugene would kill me, or worse, take it out on them. I wandered the streets aimlessly. My mind was blank, filled only with Naomi's eyes and Eli's cries. I stopped at an abandoned bus stop, sitting on the freezing bench, hugging myself for warmth. The wind howled, carrying the smell of damp, rotten garbage. I looked up at the sky, no stars. For the first time in my life, I felt truly empty. Number? Home, no job, no hope. But then the image of Naomi holding my hand, saying she believed in me, surfaced. I couldn't give up. Not now. I trudged to the diner where I worked part-time, my feet heavy as lead. The owner, Eddie, was an older man, quiet but kind. I told him everything, my voice shaking, unable to meet his eyes. "I don't have anywhere to go," I said. "I just need a corner to sleep in. I'll work harder, I promise." Eddie looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, kid. You can stay here, but don't cause trouble." I nodded, feeling like I'd been thrown a lifeline in a storm. Eddie's diner was a small, run-down place with wobbly wooden tables and the smell of grease clinging to everything. He gave me a thin blanket, and from then on, the diner became my home. By day, I borrowed Eddie's old bike, pedaling through South Memphis, looking for work. I knocked on the doors of every garage and shop, but everyone shook their heads. Not hiring, they said, or just looked at me like I was a useless kid. In the evenings, I returned to the diner, washing dishes until my hands were raw. To save money, my dinners were often the scraps customers left behind, food that looked like pig slop, but at least kept my stomach from growling. At night, I curled up on the cold floor, listening to the chirping of insects outside the window. Those days, I lived like a ghost. Wasn't Jordan Whitaker, the big brother to Eli and Naomi, anymore. I was just an 18-year-old kid, homeless, penniless, without a future. But what kept me from collapsing was my worry for my siblings. Every night, lying on the diner floor, I wondered, was Eli crying? Was Naomi being hit? Were Eugene and Brenda taking their anger out on them because I left, wanted to go back, to pound on that door and take them away? But I knew I wasn't strong enough. I had nothing but these hands and a bleeding heart. I started writing letters to my siblings, scrawling words on scraps of paper. "I'm still here," I wrote. "I'll find a way to get you out. Wait for me." I didn't know how to send those letters, but writing them made me feel connected to them, even if only in my mind. I stuffed them into my jacket pocket, a reminder that I was still Eli and Naomi's brother, even at rock bottom. Weeks passed, and I lived like a machine, working, job hunting, sleeping, repeating. I lost weight, my face gaunt, my eyes sunken from lack of sleep. But I didn't dare stop. I knew if I fell, Eli and Naomi would have no one. I had to keep going, even if every day was a battle with myself. 3 months had passed since I was kicked out of the house, and I began to see a faint glimmer of light. I was still washing dishes at Eddie's diner. Though he didn't say much, Eddie was kind enough to give me a small raise, just a few extra cents. I scrimped and saved every penny, skipping breakfast and drinking only water to set money aside. Not for me, but for Eli and Naomi. I wanted to bring them something, however small, to let them know I was still here, still fighting for them. I had no home, no steady job, but I had my love for them, the one thing no one could take away. Spent a week scouring shops around South Memphis, looking for things that might make Eli and Naomi smile. Finally, I found a few used books, a pirate adventure story for Eli, since he always loved tales of swashbucklers, and a sketchbook for Naomi, along with a cheap box of colored pencils. I also bought a bag of gummy candies, the kind we used. To share on the rare days we had spare change, I packed everything into a paper bag, tied it with twine, and scribbled a note. I'm still here. I love you. My heart pounded at the thought of seeing them again, even for just a few minutes. I wanted them to know I hadn't abandoned them. That day, I pedaled Eddie's rickety bike toward Eugene and Brenda's house. The air was cold, the winter wind cutting through my thin jacket. The streets of South Memphis were the same, noisy, dusty, filled with wary glances. When I reached the house, my heart felt like it stopped. The old wooden door, the cracks in the walls, everything was painfully familiar. I stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage before knocking. Brenda opened the door, her eyes cold as steel. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. I held up the paper bag, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just want to see Eli and Naomi. I brought some things for them." Brenda smirked, crossing her arms. "Who do you think you are? Coming back here? You're not part of this family anymore, Jordan?" I clenched my jaw, fighting to keep my anger in check. "I don't want trouble. I just want to see my siblings." Before Brenda could respond, I heard the sound of running footsteps. Naomi appeared at the door, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Jordan!" she cried, throwing herself into my arms. Eli stood behind her, more hesitant, but his eyes shone with joy. I knelt down, hugging them both tightly, feeling their small warmth. "I missed you," I whispered, holding back tears. I handed the paper bag to Naomi, and her eyes sparkled as she saw the sketchbook. Eli took the book, flipping through its pages, a smile spreading across his face.
Oh.
For the first time in 3 months, I felt alive. The moment didn't last. Eugene appeared, stumbling, reeking of liquor. "What's this bastard doing here?" he roared, shoving Naomi and Eli behind him. I stood, trying to stay calm. "I just brought some things for them," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't want trouble." But Eugene wasn't listening. He snatched the bag from Naomi's hands and threw it to the ground, candies and books scattering across the floor. "You think you can buy them off?" he bellowed. "You're trash, Jordan. Get out of here before I beat you senseless." I wanted to fight back, to grab the bag and run with my siblings, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. Naomi sobbed, trying to pick up the sketchbook while Brenda grabbed her hair, yanking hard. "Don't touch that trash," she screamed. Eli stood hunched, eyes brimming with tears, too scared to move. I lunged forward, pushing Brenda away, but Eugene was faster. A punch landed on my face, sending me sprawling. Blood streamed from my nose, hot and metallic. But I didn't care. All I could see were the bruises on Naomi's arms, on Eli's shoulders, marks of the hell I couldn't pull them from. "Don't touch them," I roared, my voice raw. But Eugene just laughed, that cruel laugh I'd seen 1,000 times. "You've got no? Say here," he said, kicking my leg. "Get out or I'll call the cops." I crawled to my feet, stealing one last look at my siblings. Naomi clung to Eli, her eyes begging me not to go, but I knew I couldn't stay. If I caused trouble, Eugene would. "Take it out on them. I'll come back," I whispered, unsure how much my promise was worth. I turned and walked out, Naomi's cries chasing me like a sharp blade. The sky was darkening, the cold slicing through my thin jacket. I wanted to turn back, pound on the door, and scream the truth about Eugene and Brenda to the world. I was just an 18-year-old kid, homeless, penniless, with no one behind me. I walked aimlessly, my feet heavy as lead, my mind blank. The bruises on Naomi's arms, Eli's terrified eyes, they haunted me, accusing me of failing, of not being the brother they needed. Just as I was about to pedal away, a sound stopped me cold. The roar of motorcycle engines, powerful and fierce, echoed from the end of the street. I turned, heart pounding. 4 large motorcycles rolled up, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Men in leather jackets covered in tattoos stopped right in front of Eugene and Brenda's house. The Red Wings and Hell's Angels emblazoned on their jackets made me freeze. I ducked behind a nearby tree, barely daring to breathe. One of them, a tall man with a ponytail, got off his bike and knocked on the door. It swung open, and I heard Eugene's drunken shouting. "What do you want?" "I don't owe you nothing," the biker smirked, his voice low but sharp. "Don't play dumb, Eugene. The drugs, the gambling. You owe us a ton. Pay up or you know what happens." My heart raced. I didn't know what was going on, but a strange spark of hope flickered inside me. If Eugene and Brenda were in trouble, maybe. This was my chance to do something for my siblings. I stepped out from the shadows, moving closer, though my legs shook. Then I saw a familiar face, Ray, the biker whose van I'd fixed at the garage. He stood there, arms crossed, his cold eyes scanning Eugene. When he spotted me, his eyes narrowed as if trying to place me. "Kid," Ray said, his voice tinged with surprise. "You're the one who fixed my van, right?" I nodded, my mouth dry. "Yeah, that's me." Ray stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but not rough. "You're my savior," he said, his voice low but emotional. "My girl, Rosie, pulled through because of you. Thank you. But what are you doing here? This is my foster parents' house." "I used to live here, but left a few months ago," I answered with a strange confidence. Eugene stood in the doorway, pale as a ghost, clearly confused. Brenda leaned out, her voice shrill. "That kid's got nothing to do with this house. He was kicked out." Ray turned to them, his gaze like a blade. "Is that so?" he said coldly. "Hey, let me tell you something. This kid saved my daughter and you too. You owe me money, and I don't like being played." Ray turned back to me, his eyes softening. "Kid, I said I'd repay you. Your foster parents owe me a hefty sum. If you're okay with it, I'll wipe their debt as a thank you. What do you say?" I didn't know what to say, but a thought sparked in my mind. This was my chance. I took a deep breath, stepping forward, my voice shaky but resolute. "Ray, I don't want you to forgive their debt. I just want to save my siblings, Eli and Naomi. They're being abused, exploited, Eugene and Brenda. Take our welfare money for booze and drugs and beat us every day." Ray looked at me, then at the house where Naomi and Eli huddled. The seasoned outlaw quickly grasped the situation. He tilted his head, signaling another biker, who stepped forward and dragged Eugene outside. "You hear what the kid said?" Growled, "You dare touch kids? Dare misuse their welfare money?" Eugene stammered, trying to deny it, but his voice shook. Brenda screamed, "Don't listen to that kid, he's lying!" But Ray didn't care. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and spoke to someone on the other end. I stood there, stunned, unable to believe what was happening. Voice softening. "You want to save your siblings, right?" "Yes. I'll help you." He pointed at Eugene and Brenda, his eyes burning. "You've got 2 choices. Sign away your rights to those kids, or I'll make sure the world knows what kind of people you are." Brenda paled, trying to yell, but another biker stepped forward, silencing her. Eugene, for the first time, looked like a cornered animal. "Fine, fine," he muttered, voice trembling. "We'll sign, just don't call the cops." Ray nodded, signaling one of his crew to grab paperwork from the bike. I looked at Naomi and Eli, my heart pounding. They stood there, eyes wide, not fully understanding. But I saw a spark of hope in their gazes. While waiting for the papers, Ray pulled me aside. "You did the right thing helping me," he said. "Now let me do the right thing for you. I know you and your siblings have been through hell. I'll help you get a fresh start." I didn't know what to say, just nodded, tears silently falling. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Paperwork arrived and was slammed onto the table. Under Ray's icy stare, and the menacing presence of the bikers blocking the door, Eugene and Brenda had no choice. They reluctantly picked up the pen, hands shaking, and signed, officially relinquishing their rights to Eli and Naomi. In that moment, Naomi burst into tears, throwing herself into my arms as if afraid I'd vanish. Eli stepped forward, grabbing my hand, his eyes, for the first time, free of fear. And for the first time, his voice didn't stutter. "You did it, Jordan," he whispered, eyes red. I pulled them both close, my heart ready to burst. After all those years of suffering, we were finally free. Ray nodded, his voice firm. "I'll take you kids somewhere safe. Trust me." I nodded back, leading Naomi and Eli to the waiting motorcycle. As we rode away, I glanced back at the old house, the place that had swallowed my childhood in violence and shame. Eugene and Brenda stood on the porch, their eyes full of resentment, but they didn't dare move. I knew they wanted to scream, to stop me, to make me pay. But now they could only stand there, powerless, as the three of us left under the protection of men they wouldn't dare cross. I turned forward, looking at the road ahead. A new horizon was opening. No more beatings, no more tears, no more fear. I left that place without looking back, feeling a strange sense of lightness and peace. The roar of the motorcycle engines drowned out every sound in South Memphis. The wail of police sirens, the arguments from rundown houses, the wind whistling. Through trashes strewn alleys all faded into insignificance. Naomi sat in front of me, her small hands clutching my jacket, while Eli hugged me from behind, his head resting against my back. I felt their warmth, the warmth I'd feared I'd lost forever. Ray led the way, his bike surging forward powerfully, as if declaring that no one could touch us anymore. We stopped in front of an old but tidy apartment complex on the eastern edge of Memphis. The low-rise buildings, painted gray, had windows glowing with warm light. It wasn't luxurious, but compared to Eugene and Brenda's house, it felt like paradise. Ray dismounted and motioned for us to follow. "This is a friend's place," he said, his voice low but certain. "You'll stay here for now. Safe, clean, and no one will bother you." Ray's friend, a middle-aged man named Carl, greeted us at the door. He had a weathered face, salt and pepper hair, but kind eyes. "Come on in, kids," he said, opening the door wide. Inside was a modest apartment with a simple living room, a small kitchen corner, and 2 bedrooms. There was an old sofa, a wooden table, and the faint smell of coffee. I looked around, hardly believing this would be our home. No more stench of liquor, no more shouting, no more bruises on our skin. Naomi and Eli clung to me, their eyes wide as if they couldn't believe we were truly free. "Is this our home, Jordan?" Eli asked, his voice tiny, still with a hint of a stutter. I knelt down, taking his hand. "For now, Eli, but I promise we'll have a real home." Naomi looked at me, her eyes shimmering. "You won't leave us again, right?" I hugged them both tightly, fighting back tears. "Never, Naomi, I promise." Ray stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching us. "I told Carl about your situation," he said. "You'll be safe here, but there's one more thing. Jordan, you need a job. I know a big motorcycle garage in the suburbs that specializes in bikes. For guys like us, they're looking for help, and I think you're good enough to try." I stared at Ray at a loss for words. This man, with his intimidating appearance and a past I didn't dare ask about, was giving me a chance I'd never dreamed of. After settling Eli and Naomi in, I borrowed Ray's phone and called Eddie, the diner owner. I told him everything that had happened and asked for some time off. Eddie was quiet for a moment, then let out a relieved laugh. "So, you finally got those kids out of there, huh?" said warmly. "Good, you did the right thing. My diner's always open for you whenever you're ready to come back." I thanked him and hung up, my heart light. Amid the loss and chaos, there were still people like Eddie, like Ray, rare, kind souls in a world full of judgment. And that made me feel hopeful. The flame in my chest burned brighter than ever. The next day, Ray took me to the garage. It was nothing like the one I'd worked at before. This place was massive, with rows of gleaming motorcycles, the air thick with the smell of metal and gasoline. The mechanics, most of them tattooed and in leather jackets, greeted me with friendly nods. "You the kid Ray vouched for?" "A man likely," the manager asked. He had a bushy beard and eyes sharp as knives. "You know how to fix bikes?" I nodded, recounting my years at the old garage, how I'd fixed Ray's van in under an hour. He raised an eyebrow and motioned for me to start. I got to work immediately, tackling a Harley with a faulty ignition system. My hands moved quickly, as if all the pain and fear of the past months poured into every bolt, every wire. When I started the bike and its engine roared smoothly, the manager nodded. "Nice work, kid. You're hired." I smiled, the first real smile in months, feeling like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself. Ray clapped me on the shoulder. "Congrats, kid. You're set here." I was so happy I wanted to hug him and cry, but I knew tough guys like Ray didn't do soft moments. Life for me, Eli, and Naomi slowly got better, but I knew my siblings needed more. In those first days at the apartment, I realized they weren't the kids I once knew. Eli would wake up screaming from nightmares, and Naomi grew quiet, her eyes often staring into the distance. The years with Eugene and Brenda had left scars invisible to the eye. I couldn't let them keep living in fear. True to his word, Ray didn't stop at just getting us to safety. One afternoon, he showed up with a middle-aged woman named Linda A., lawyer specializing in children's rights. "Ray told me about you kids," Linda said, her voice gentle but firm. "We'll help you get legal guardianship of Eli and Naomi. It won't be easy. We need to prove Eugene and Brenda are unfit foster parents." I nodded, my heart pounding. I told her everything, the beatings, the insults, how they used our welfare money for booze and drugs, leaving us hungry and scared. Linda took notes carefully, her eyes full of determination. "We'll make this work, Jordan," she said, "but you'll need to be patient." Meanwhile, Ray did something I didn't expect. He brought his daughter, Rosie, to play with Eli and Naomi. Rosie, the girl I'd helped by fixing Ray's van, was now healthy, with a radiant smile and a ponytail. At first, Eli and Naomi were shy, hiding behind me, but Rosie didn't mind. She brought a board game and started telling funny stories about school and her puppy. Slowly, I saw Eli start to laugh, and Naomi picked up a crayon, her eyes sparkling. For the first time, I saw them play like normal kids, free from fear's shadow. In the afternoons, Ray would stop by, sometimes with pizza or a bag of old toys. He didn't say much, but when he saw Eli and Naomi smile, he'd nod at me as if saying, "Keep going, kid. You're doing good." I didn't know why Ray helped us so much. Maybe because I saved Rosie. Maybe because he'd known dark days and understood what it was like to be trapped. Whatever the reason, I was grateful beyond words. Eli and Naomi started therapy, arranged by Linda. The sessions took place at a small center where they talked to a therapist named Stacy. Stacy told me both had severe trauma. Eli dreamed of Eugene chasing him with a stick, and Naomi felt unworthy. Of love, hearing that, my heart felt crushed. I'd tried to protect them, but I couldn't stop the invisible scars Eugene and Brenda left. I started spending more time with them, despite the garage taking up most of my days. Every evening, I sat with Eli and Naomi, reading stories to Eli or drawing colorful pictures with Naomi. I did everything to make them feel safe, to let them know I'd never leave. Slowly, Eli's stutter faded, and Naomi began sharing her dreams of becoming an artist, of painting the world. One afternoon, while I was fixing a bike at the garage, Ray stopped by. He watched me work, then said, "You know, Jordan, you're not just a good mechanic. You're a great brother, and I believe you'll do even more." I looked at him, unsure how to respond, but inside, a fire blazed stronger than ever. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to give Eli and Naomi the life they deserved. That night, as I lay in bed, the image of my foster parents, Eugene and Brenda, flashed through my mind. They were still living in that house, carrying on as if their crimes didn't exist. I knew they needed to face justice, not just for what they'd done to us, but to ensure they couldn't harm any other kids. Linda, the lawyer Ray introduced, became our guide in this legal battle. One morning, she called me to her small office, where papers cluttered the desk and the faint smell of coffee lingered. "Jordan," she said, her voice serious but warm, We have enough evidence to take Eugene and Brenda to court. It bruises on. Eli and Naomi, your testimony, and the psychologist's reports, they're all crucial pieces. But you need to brace yourself. This won't be an easy fight. I nodded, my heart pounding. I knew this meant facing Eugene and Brenda again, reliving those painful years in front of a room full of strangers. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was doing this for Eli and Naomi, for the nights they cried in the dark, the times I watched them suffer helplessly. I'm ready, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Linda worked tirelessly. She contacted Child Protective Services CPS, demanding a full investigation into Eugene and Brenda's foster care records. CPS dug into their financials, uncovering thousands of dollars in welfare money they'd misappropriated for personal use. Liquor, cigarettes, gambling. Each revelation was like a knife cutting through the facade they'd built for years. Ray didn't stand on the sidelines. He leveraged his connections, from biker friends to media contacts. One day while I was working, at the garage, a reporter from a local news channel showed up. Her name was Maria, with short hair and sharp eyes. "Jordan Whitaker?" she asked, holding out a microphone. "I hear you have a story worth telling." I hesitated, unaccustomed to attention, but Ray stood behind me, nodding encouragingly. "Tell it, kid. The world needs to hear." I sat down with Maria and told her everything, from the beatings and insults to losing my job and home, and finally, how Ray and his friends helped me save Eli and Naomi. I spoke about the bruises on Naomi's arms, Eli's cries in the night, and how Eugene and Brenda treated us like cash machines. My voice trembled at first, but as I went on, I felt lighter, as if years of pain were pouring out of my chest. Maria's story aired on the local news that evening. Eli, Naomi, and I sat in Carl's apartment, eyes glued to the old TV, when my face appeared on the screen with the headline, "A Story of Resilience and Compassion in South Memphis." Naomi squeezed my hand. "You're famous, Jordan," she whispered, her voice a mix of pride and awe. Eli smiled, and for the first time, he spoke without stuttering. "You're our hero," but I didn't feel like a hero. I was just a kid trying to do the right thing. The story sparked a wave of reactions in the community. People shared it on social media, from neighborhood moms to strangers across Tennessee. A group of volunteers even approached Linda, offering legal and financial support. I wasn't used to the attention, but I knew it meant Eugene and Brenda couldn't hide forever. The trial took place 3 months later in a small courthouse in downtown Memphis. I walked into the courtroom holding Eli and Naomi's hands, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Eugene and Brenda sat across the room, their eyes avoiding mine, but I saw fear in them. They weren't the monsters who once made me tremble anymore. It's just two small people exposed before justice. Linda presented the evidence with clarity and precision, photos of bruises on Eli and Naomi, the psychologist reports, and financial records showing how Eugene and Brenda misused welfare funds. I was called to the witness stand. My heart raced. I told the whole story. The beatings, the insults, the nights we went hungry. I looked the judge in the eye, my voice steady. "I just want my siblings to be safe," I said. "I want them to have a life without fear." Naomi and Eli were called up too. Naomi, only 12, spoke clearly. "Jordan's the only one who's always protected us. I don't want to go back to them." Eli, still stuttering when nervous, held my hand and said, "I want to stay with Jordan. He's my brother." Their words, small but sincere, silenced the courtroom. I saw Linda's eyes glisten, and Ray, seated in the back, nodded at me. The trial ended with the verdict I'd been waiting for. Eugene and Brenda were charged with child abuse and financial fraud. They were permanently stripped of foster care rights, not just for Eli and Naomi, but for any child in the future. Eugene was sentenced to 3 years in prison, while Brenda received probation with mandatory community service and strict supervision. As they were led out of the courtroom, I saw Brenda crying, not out of remorse, but because they'd lost everything. I didn't feel joy, but I felt relief. Justice had finally been served. South Memphis kept talking about us. Some called me a local hero, but I didn't like the label. It was just a brother protecting his siblings. Still, I couldn't deny our story inspired others. A local school invited me to speak to students about overcoming adversity. I stood before the crowd, hesitant. But seeing Eli and Naomi smiling in the front row gave me strength. Never give up, I told the kids. No matter how many times life knocks you down, get up for the ones you love. Linda finalized the paperwork for me to become Eli and Naomi's legal guardian. When I received the court documents, I hugged them tightly, tears streaming down my face. We're a family, I said. In this time, no one can tear us apart. Naomi grinned, the brightest smile I'd ever seen, and Eli hugged me, whispering, "Thank you, Jordan." A year had passed since the trial, and everything was better than I'd ever dreamed. We were still living in Carl's apartment complex, but the small apartment had truly become home. I bought a few things: a new table for Naomi to draw on, a small bookshelf for Eli, and a desk lamp to brighten the room. Every evening when I returned from the garage, the smell of Carl's coffee and the sound of Eli and Naomi's laughter greeted me at the door. It was something I'd never had in the years with Eugene and Brenda, a place to come back to, a place where I felt safe. Ray, the man who changed our lives, didn't stop at getting us out of hell. One day he stopped by the garage where I worked and pulled me aside. "Jordan," he said, his voice low but serious, "you've got talent and you've got heart. Want to help you open your own garage. Nothing big, but enough to stand on your own." I was stunned, unable to believe my ears. "Are you serious, Ray?" I asked. He grinned, a rare smile softening his weathered face. "I don't joke about money, kid. Kid, I'll put in the capital. You just keep working hard like you always do." And so, True Brothers Garage was born. The name was my idea, a tribute to the fact that I wasn't just working for myself, but for Eli, Naomi, and even people like Ray, who'd become family in ways I never expected. The garage was on the outskirts of Memphis, a small but clean space, with 2 repair bays and a corner where I displayed some of Naomi's artwork. Ray didn't just provide the money. He brought in customers, his biker friends, who initially intimidated me, but turned out to be generous men, paying fairly and sharing jokes that made me laugh. I worked from dawn to dusk, but this time it was for myself. Every bike I fixed, every dollar I earned was a step toward building a better future for Eli and Naomi. I no longer had to hide it's money in an old sock or worry about someone stealing it. I used my earnings to buy new clothes for my siblings, pay for their therapy sessions, and take them for ice cream on weekends, small things that once felt like impossible dreams. Eli and Naomi were back in school, attending a public one near the apartment complex. For the first time, I saw them actually enjoy going. Eli, though still shy, started talking about new friends and a math teacher who encouraged him. Naomi brought home vibrant drawings of suns, trees, and the 3 of us holding hands. She still went to therapy, but her therapist, Sarah, said she was making progress, learning to trust the world again. Rosie, Ray's daughter, became an inseparable part of our lives. She'd come over on weekends, bringing her radiant energy and endless stories. They played board games, ran around outside, and even painted a large mural together for our living room. Watching them laugh and play, I felt my heart healing bit by bit. One afternoon, as I was closing up the garage, a group from the community came to see me. They were people who'd heard our story through Maria's news report, people who donated. To help us in our darkest days, they brought a wooden sign engraved with the words, "True Brothers Garage, where no one is left behind." "You're an inspiration, Jordan," an older woman said, her eyes shining. "You showed us that no matter how tough life gets, kindness can win." I shook my head, embarrassed. "I'm not an inspiration," I said. "I'm just a brother trying to do the right thing." But deep down, I knew they were right about one thing. Kindness had won. Not just my kindness, but Ray's, Eddie's, Linda's, Carl's, Maria's, and all the strangers who believed in us. They were why we were standing here today, sitting in front of my garage, watching Eli and Naomi ride their bikes down the street. The sun setting and painting the road red, I thought back to my childhood days, sitting on a rock, believing the world held nothing good. But now, everything was different. Eli laughed loudly, waving at me, and Naomi stopped her bike, running over to hug me. "Jordan, I got an A in art today." "Right," she boasted, her eyes sparkling. I ruffled her hair, smiling. "Great job, Naomi. Tonight, I'll make pizza to celebrate." As they rode off, I sat back, looking out at the road. I thought about the years gone by, the beatings, the cold nights, the times I thought I'd break. I'd learned that life wasn't fair, but it wasn't cruel forever. I'd learned to stand up, not just for myself, but for those I loved, for those who stood by me when the world turned its back. For the first time in my life, I whispered to myself, I'm not just a survivor, I'm a home builder. I stood up, locked the garage, and headed home, where Eli and Naomi were waiting.
Ow.
Their laughter rang out, and I knew this was our true home, not perfect, but filled with love and hope.